in here somewhere. David, did we get the 7:15 thing done? Time certain? Okay. Good evening. I'm going to call the council meeting to order. City Clerk, please call the roll.
The record will reflect that Councilmember Daigle is absent and she has an excused absence.
Mr. City Attorney, is there a closed session report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The council met in closed session to discuss the matters revealed on the open session agenda. No reportable action was taken. And I would also note that the council adjourned back into open session, but is considering re-adjourning into closed session at the conclusion of the open session meeting.
Thank you. Please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Councilmember Rosansky, and then remain standing for the invocation, which will be led by Pastor Bradley Steenstra from Newport Harbor Lutheran Church.
Please join me in our pledge to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Only you, Sovereign One, find yourself in the not always enviable position of knowing the many things that stress the hearts of those who come here this night. Whether we happen to be council members, city employees, residents, or other interested parties, we bring into the room with us many different personal desires and objectives, as well as a jumble of burdens and worries that can interfere with our ability to listen in a caring way to what others might have to say. So we ask you now to give us a generous measure of your gentle and patient spirit, along with the grace to hear beneath what might sometimes be impassioned and not well-chosen words spoken aloud, the very real human needs that motivate them. Help all assembled here to do the hard work of establishing policies that advance the general welfare of this richly blessed community, that Newport Beach might be forever seen as a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. Please be seated. Let me announce that at about 7:15 we're going to take up the proposed city charter revisions to give people a little heads up on that. Let me invite forward Tim Brown, the chairman of our Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission. I see him there. We have a presentation to make. This is National Parks and Recreation Month. And let me just read this here. Whereas Parks and Recreation creates community through people, parks, and programs, and whereas Parks and Recreation makes lives and communities better now and into the future, and whereas parks help preserve and protect the natural and cultural resources of our communities and provide access to the serenity and the inspiration of nature, and whereas Park and Recreation services support more productive workforces, enhance the desirability of locations for businesses and families, and stimulate tourism revenues to increase a total community development model, and whereas Park and Recreation facilitates community problem solving and strengthens community image, sense of place, and increases cultural unity, and whereas Park and Recreation promotes health and wellness and reduces health care costs, and whereas Parks and Recreation foster human development, helping young people to develop and grow into healthy adults, and helping adults continue to live longer through lifelong learning, and whereas Parks and Recreation strengthens community safety and security by offering positive alternatives for youth which reduce juvenile crime, and whereas thousands of Newport Beach children, adults, and seniors benefit from the wide range of services, facilities, and programs provided by the City of Newport Beach Department of Recreation and Senior Services and General Services, now therefore be resolved that I, Keith D. Curry, Mayor of the City of Newport Beach, do hereby proclaim July as Parks and Recreation Month and encourage all residents to enjoy and recognize the social, physical, mental, economic, environmental, and community benefits derived from our programs which provide something of value for everyone. Tim, if you'd like to come to the podium and say a few words, and I'll come down and we'll make this presentation.
Well, I just want to take the opportunity to first say thank you on behalf of the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission. the Department of Parks and Beach and Recreation and Senior Services here at the city, and for general services. And on behalf of them, I gladly accept this. And again, thank you for recognizing Parks, Beaches, and Recreation for the month of July. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we've got time to get council announcements in. Let's start with Councilmember Gardner. Or wait a minute, we should do notice to the public first. Lillian?
Notice to the public. The city provides a yellow sign-in card to assist in the preparation of the minutes. The completion of the card is not required in order to address the council. Speakers must limit comments to 5 minutes on agenda items. The council has the discretion to extend or shorten the time limit on agenda or non-agenda items. As a courtesy, please turn cell phones off or set them in the silent mode.
Thank you. Councilmember announcements, Councilmember Gardner.
Nothing.
Councilmember Webb.
Councilmember Daigle asked me to give a brief report on our Aviation Committee meeting in which we had a presentation from the Orange County Airport in addition to Tom Edwards, our advocate, and we discussed the Duke and the new procedures that FAA is looking at. And one of the things that was made very clear was that while the city and the county would love to be able to, say, change those patterns today, this is something that's up to the FAA, and they unfortunately move a lot slower than we would like them to move. They are at least listening to us, and we are working as best we can to try to get them to do what is best for the community. And I'd just like to remind people, as you look at the photograph of the bay over there and notice it's not straight. So when we all say, force them to fly exactly down the middle of that bay, it's a little bit more difficult to accomplish than just saying it. So we are on top of it, and our committee is very interested in making sure that we are heard by FAA. Secondly, I'd like to compliment our Recreation Department for the wonderful event that they put on for the 4th of July on the 3rd of July at Mariners Park in conjunction with the Mariners Foundation. It was, I think, one of the largest groups of children on patriotically decorated bicycles I've seen for a long time, and everybody seemed to have a wonderful time between 11 and 3 in the afternoon, and so I think that could not have happened without our wonderful staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Selich.
I have nothing this evening.
Mr. Rosansky.
Nothing, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Hand.
Two things. I was joined by at least 2 or 3 other city council members, I guess, at the Barrett-Jackson Auto Auction, and which apparently was quite a success with over $15 million of cars sold, and I'm sure a lot of room nights sold, especially at hotels here in Newport Beach. It's a great event. It's the inaugural event, and I'm hoping that it continues and grows ever stronger. One of the nice things about being on City Council is that we get to enjoy lots of aspects of our community, and especially over the 4th of July, I was able to join Councilmember Webb and Mayor Curry at the Mariners Parade on July 3rd, and then the Peninsula Point July 4th Parade in the morning, and then I went to work on July 4th. I came down here for the Police Department briefing at noon on West Newport security, and then was on my bicycle for most of the rest of the afternoon, seeing how things went in West Newport on the 4th of July. We took a different approach this year toward our vision over a few years of getting a family-friendly 4th of July in that area, and I think we made an excellent first step this year. Just looking at the numbers, arrests were down, although it appears the crowds were up. And beyond that, it seemed like a gentler crowd, and I take some anecdotal evidence to that effect from the fact that there was 33% less trash picked up this year than there was last year, only 8 tons of it. And so along the way, I'd like to thank our General Services Department for another great job in doing their work, but most especially City Manager Dave Kiff and the Police Department, including our new Police Chief, Jay Johnson, as well as Captain Johnson, Dale Johnson, and Lieutenant McKnight, who did such a great job strategizing a new approach, taking us in a new and apparently better direction for the 4th of July celebration, where we can all have a lot of fun and not get too far out of line. So we're going to continue that effort again, and we're going to start our planning for next year in just, I suppose, a few more weeks, and see if we can't take another good step forward for the 4th of July on the peninsula. Thanks again to all city staff for their help.
Thank you, Mr. Henn. This has been a busy couple of weeks. I was privileged to do a tour of the Newport Learning Center site, which is a new facility being constructed by Orange Coast College here in Newport Beach. I think it will be the primary college facility in Newport Beach, which will include an art museum, some classrooms, and will really be a big improvement for the neighborhood where it is going in. I also had the opportunity to participate with Chief Johnson's swearing in, which was a great ceremony attended by many police officers from around Southern California. Of course, this was a relevant week, put on by Paul Salata, and I had the opportunity to give the key to the city to Tim Toon. This year is Mr. Irrelevant, number 255 in the draft, in a what is now the 35th or so year of a ceremony that honors not only the last guy picked in the draft, but also brings a lot of recognition to Newport Beach, and is something that that football fans across the country look forward to and watch. I want to thank the staff for hosting a very successful open house regarding the Civic Center, answered a lot of questions for people who came to see what was going on, and I think did a very good job with that. Earlier in the week, at a Navy League event, Councilmember Gardner and I were privileged to welcome the crew from the USS Gary, which is a frigate which was being offloaded in Seal Beach. They had the opportunity to come and be hosted to a great party here in Newport Beach before continuing on to San Diego. I want to thank the American Legion for the opportunity to ride in yesterday's boat parade, another great Newport Beach tradition that the community really loves and appreciates. We saw a promotion this last 2 weeks. As Chief Luman was leaving, we promoted some officers in our police department, and I'm confident they're going to do an outstanding job for the community. And along with Mayor Pro Tem Henn, who was on his bike and throughout this community on the 4th of July, checking things out, I had the opportunity to sit through the police briefing along with the Mayor Pro Tem, and I think our guys just did a terrific job in organizing departments from all over Southern California for that event. And then finally, I just want to recognize a couple of us have talked about the Mariners Parade, but this year we've honored a very special Grand Marshal for that parade for his 40 years of service to the city, and that's our own Councilman and Centennial Mayor Don Webb. Okay, I think now we're ready for better late than never. With the council's indulgence, I'm told I can take up out of order, because we have some people here to talk on this, item 11, which is the adoption of resolutions calling for a special election and also for some city charter reform. Before we go into the staff report, I'd like to make a couple of comments. I know some of our commissioners would like to speak. We've formed a very distinguished citizens committee to look at this issue, and they've come out with some outstanding recommendations to reform our city charter to move this city really into the 21st century. Some of the charter really hasn't had a serious comprehensive review since the 70s. It was written in the 1950s, and many of its provisions are outdated, outmoded, and in some cases illegal. But there's a story to be told, because Thursday I was at the Chamber of Commerce, and Bernie Falstad asked me if we were going to deal with the provisions in the charter that allowed the city council to raise property taxes without a vote. And I sort of blithely responded that there are no such provisions. Proposition 13 took precedence over that, and we have to have a vote for all property tax increases. But Bernie's question got me thinking, and so I went back and I checked with the city attorney, and lo and behold, I might have been mistaken. It appears that in 1966, the voters went to the polls and adopted what was at the time a tax limitation. It said if you raise property taxes more than a certain level, then you have to have a vote. Well, implicit in that was if you raise them less than that, you didn't. And that was because prior to Proposition 13, city councils all over the place were always raising the tax rate. So having a limit was a taxpayer protection. But after 1978, when Proposition 13 passed, that limitation apparently has created a loophole that enables taxes to be raised without a vote. Well, I was sort of stunned by that, and so the question is how much could they actually be raised? Because there are several provisions in the ordinance. If you took them at their full face value, we could raise taxes $300 million. We could raise twice the city's budget. But in fact, in talking to the city attorney, and he and I spent the better part of the weekend looking at this, what survives are the ability to raise taxes to cover pension benefits at the level they were in 1978. Not the level they were in terms of money, but at the level they were in terms of benefits. So we're at 3 at 50 now. If we were at 2 at 60 then, you go back and you compute what that would be today. It's probably a number of about $10 million. In addition to that, because in 1938, the voters passed an authorization of a 5 cent per $100 valuation tax for libraries, we have the ability to raise what would be approximately an $18 million tax for libraries. Now, to put that number in perspective, our total budget for libraries is $6 million. So very clearly, these provisions are both highly dangerous in terms of our ability to overtax, but they are also, I think, outmoded by Proposition 13. Pretty clearly, when the voters voted for Prop 13, I remember this because I actually knew Howard Jarvis and worked with Paul Gann, and I know our chairman of our commission was in the legislature and implemented Prop 13. We thought we were putting a limit on taxes. And so the proposal that you see before you today, colleagues, has an option to it that would eliminate those provisions that allow us to raise property taxes. I think that's simply wrong. We ought to live like every other community within the confines of Proposition 13 and take those provisions out of the city charter so that the people vote on every increase in property taxes. The other thing that we discovered, and we discovered this morning, is that there's a provision that allows us to pass a tax for capital programs with only a 60% vote. Proposition 13 and Proposition 218 require a 66.6% vote. Now, that provision probably is overtaken by Proposition 13, but nonetheless it exists in our charter. And so the proposal that you have before you tonight also eliminates that provision and makes us consistent with Proposition 13 by taking out that loophole as well. And I know, because I've talked to many of the commissioners, that they'll want to speak to these matters. But in addition to the very important cleanup that we're doing for the city charter, we're also eliminating these Proposition 13 loopholes that have existed, in some cases, I guess, here for 32 years, and making it very clear that if we're going to have a tax increase in Newport Beach, the voters are going to vote for it in accordance with the provision of Proposition 13. So what you have before you is a little bit changed from, I think, the staff report that you've seen before, but I believe changed for the better. So with that as sort of an introduction, let me ask Mr. City Manager, is there an additional staff report you'd like to make before I open it up for comments from my colleagues and the council?
No, sir.
Okay. Does anybody on the council wish to have any comments before we open it up to the public?
I just, not so much on that, but on the oil aspect of it, I just wondered if our utility director could come up a moment. Because I know with this oil spill in the Gulf, people are so concerned, and this does talk about slant drilling. And could you tell us what the differences are between the oil rigs offshore and slant drilling, and what dangers we might be presenting to the environment, if any?
Sure. Councilmember Gardner. The wells that BP, British Petroleum, operate in the Gulf are platform wells that reside on the surface of the ocean. The drilling units actually go through a few hundred feet of water before they hit the ocean's floor, then they drill. What I understand from that instance is that the rupture was at the ocean's floor, right where they couldn't control it because it was several hundred feet from the platform. Our slant drills reside on dry land. It's in the county unincorporated land just north of PCH between the Santa Ana River and Newport Beach. And our wells are slant drilled at about a 40-degree angle out towards the ocean, but they still are, none of the casings are closer than 400 feet to the surface. So
It's quite a bit different than the Gulf wells.
Say they're 400 feet from the surface, you don't mean 400 feet?
They're below the dirt.
That's what I wanted to clarify, not just...
Simply, not water, but below.
Okay.
We're no closer than 400 feet from the surface of the ground.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, let me open it up for public comments. Comments on the city charter amendment. We'll be back to other public comments here on other issues soon. This is on the city charter proposed changes.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It's a pleasure for me to be able to come forward and to support the revision as far as the recommendations that were made by the commission. We have not had an opportunity to have a formal formal discussion of the resolutions and formal action. And so I'm speaking primarily on behalf of my observations and somewhat background that the commission went through in making a determination that we did. At the time that we considered this section 1107, which are the tax limits, we were advised by the city attorney that prior levies were grandfathered in under Prop 13, which I indeed believe to be true. In fact, Commissioner Rush Hill then had concerns and led the questioning on the ambiguity of Section 1107 that would give future councils the authority to raise taxes without a vote of the public. And I have to say, based on my legislative involvement, both with the enactment of Prop 13 and 218, incidentally, Prop 62 did not affect charter cities because it was strictly a statutory constitutional amendment, while the others were constitutional amendments. And 218, I think, clearly stated that any ad valorem tax levy by 4/5 vote of the council is unconstitutional. So my concern at that time was that anything that would be levied by the council would be ruled unconstitutional. But with that subject somewhat unresolved in our minds, we moved on to other subjects, noting that our charge was not necessarily to render a legal opinion on the validity or thereof of that section. But indeed, if people have concluded that there is a Prop 13 loophole, and even though I doubt that there is, I fully support this closing by repealing Section 1107 and 1113, which was not assigned to us, part of our responsibility. I think that it would hold equally as well in that particular section. So I think it's very important reassurance that we give the voters of Newport Beach alone that they are in charge of approving any ad valorem tax-based taxes in the future. Thank you very much for the opportunity to serve. I think that it has been a very gratifying experience for us, and we certainly appreciate the support that we've had from staff and council, and look forward to a successful election in November. I know there are other members here who would like to speak to this as well, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman Bergeson.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Rush Hill, and while I am honored to have served as a commissioner on the Charter Update Cities Committee, I'm here this evening as an individual. As you have heard, Marion mentioned that we have not had time to have a formal meeting, but I would like to urge your approval of the Commission's recommendations, with the exception of leaving unchanged 1107 and 1113. I support with enthusiasm your resolution this evening, which omits 1117 and significantly modifies 1113. When the topic of 1107 came up, I was the one that raised the issue as to whether or not this, in fact, would allow 4 members of our City Council, by their vote, to increase property taxes in the city of Newport Beach. This, of course, was quite disturbing. We did have a discussion on it, but the Commission came to a decision to leave it unchanged, in part because, and I would quote our recommendation, the Commission recommends that Charter Selection 1107 remain unchanged since it is currently consistent with the California Constitution. I would argue that if there is any uncertainty in the Charter's compliance with Proposition 13 and 218, then leaving the Charter unchanged in this area is clearly not acceptable. While the Commission did not address 1113, It was my belief that that parts of this were not in compliance with the state constitution, and therefore, if anything might be considered as grandfathered claused in, that it too should be modified significantly. I therefore urge the council to vote in favor of the resolution, which strikes 1117 and which significantly modifies 1113, and would ask that you also consider favorably the other recommendations that have been made by the Charter Commission. I would hope that we all agree that the property owners of Newport Beach deserve the complete protection that the state has provided us under Prop 13 and Prop 218. I appreciate the opportunity that you've given us tonight to present this information to you.
Thank you, Mr. Hill.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I, too, was honored to serve on the Charter Update Committee and do recall, as stated by our chair, Marion Bergeson, and my colleague on the commission, Rush Hill, that we did have a discussion of Section 1107, but at the time, we concluded that the provisions of Proposition 13 and Proposition 218 likely preempted this area of allowing the council to be able to vote independently on raising property taxes in the city of Newport Beach. There apparently still is some confusion or ambiguity as to whether that really is the case, and so I am, and others I'm sure on the commission that haven't spoken but may speak, are pleased that you, Mr. Mayor, and the City Council hopefully will adopt your suggestion that 1107 be put into the group of recommendations that our commission has made to be submitted to the voters, and in this case to repeal 1107. And even though we didn't discuss 1113, it apparently does have similar types of provisions in that are somewhat confusing and would possibly eliminate the protections that we all favor, that Prop 13 give all of us citizens, that the legislative body of our city, the City Council, cannot act independently to raise property taxes without a vote of the people. So I do support your resolution, and I appreciate what you're doing this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Bernie Svalstad, and council, thank you, Keith, for following up. I would remind you that even if we have Prop 13, there are a lot of people in the state of California, a few people, whatever, that are trying to repeal Prop 13. So I don't think that we should kind of have Prop 13 as a protection in the first place, but I do recommend that you repeal 1107 and I guess 1113, whatever. But I think it's important. Theory, the way this could work, $1 million home could cost somebody $10,000 tax, $5 million, $50,000 tax. So this, back 30, 40 years ago, maybe wasn't onerous when a house cost $10,000, $20,000. But if you have houses at $1 million, $5, $10, $20 million, this could be a tremendous tax. And we have a very conservative council now. Who knows what's going to happen 5, 10 years from now. So I think that we should protect the citizens. And this would be a terrible deal if all these code and all the work you've done were defeated because of tax issues. So I recommend these changes.
Thank you.
Mayor Curry, members of the council, my name is Richard Lures, and I'm with the Newport Beach Chamber of Commerce and was privileged to serve on the Charter Update Commission, and I appreciated the opportunity to do so. I just want to add two things that I don't want to repeat everything that's been said. I agree with everything that's been said so far. I just want to add my comment about, first off, thank you to Mayor Curry for being at the meeting where this topic was raised in the first place. Had you not been there, the topic most likely wouldn't have been raised, and we wouldn't have been here talking about this tonight. Secondly, I really appreciate the mayor's initiative in following up with that conversation that took place, spending some time with the city attorney, looking into the matter, and indeed finding out that there may be some exposure in terms of property owners in the city of Newport Beach. And so I want to say thank you to the mayor, Keith Curry, for his diligence in following up and bringing this to everyone's attention this evening. We really appreciate the effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Next speaker, come forward, please. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sherry Pence. I'm with the Construction Industry Force Account Council, and I did appear at a Charter Update Commission meeting and presented a letter that speaks about item number 1110, Contracts on Public Works, and it's presenting the information regarding the California Uniform Construction Cost Accounting Act, which allows the city to adopt a resolution to become signatory to the act to where their formal bidding threshold is raised to 125. So if the council, and I did present this at the meeting, I do have a copy of the letter. The Charter Update Commission told me that it would be a matter for the council to consider. So I'm here today to ask you to consider this information, and it is a copy of the letter, and I do have our brochure. And what we are is we represent the contractors associations and the labor unions for fair and competitive bidding in public works construction. And with the environment, competitive bidding saves the taxpayers money. So it's an item that you might want to consider because you still have to get this approved by the voters. If you do adopt the resolution and present it to the State Controller's Office, you could automatically raise your formal bidding limit threshold to $125,000. So with your permission, I'd like to present this information. Thank you. And here's my name for the... So thank you for your attention, and thank you for considering this information.
Thank you for coming down today. Are there any other speakers on the city charter?
Good evening. W.R. Dildine. Been a property owner here since '65, resident for the last 5 years, had a second home here all the previous years. Reference has just been made to you about the Construction Industry Force Account Council and the Uniform Construction Cost Accounting Act. I have a copy of correspondence addressed to the city back in '92 when the city was introduced to the act by a local resident. This, having attended, I think it was 3 of the commission meetings, the first meeting when this was discussed, where there was no public input allowed, though I was able to speak during open or public comment period. And I attended the next meeting when the minutes reflected a statement that I had made, and after receiving a call from Sacramento, having represented the construction industry for 26 years on the commission that overlooks this commission, to have their minutes changed. And then I was here at the study session, of which I do realize, as the commission, in my opinion, was dismissed, and I walked out the door, there was a chance for public comment. The big thing is, I feel, after having been involved in this for 20 years, and all those years, your League of California Cities, the County Supervisors Associations, school districts, all the public and local agencies have been represented, that we've done an outstanding job. It provides an informal bidding procedure. And one of the things that troubles me here tonight is when I read this, is that you are increasing your formal bid limits to $125,000. The way your current charter reads, the way the other sections of the law applying to cities read, this means that you will be able to do $125,000 of work in-house. And that's what we, the industry, have been opposed to, is the force account limits. The comments I made before your commission for $250,000 in an informal bidding procedure was addressed at the state level, and the primary objection or reason for that is you are going out to bid. This county has 14 cities. The county has opted into the program, and there are 11 other local agencies that have adopted into this. I think you can do a much better job, create all the things you are after that were tried to express at the first hearing. I felt by just adopting into this act, the limits are changed every 6 years or 5 years. The other thing is, if there is a problem, you don't end up in court, you end up before the commission. And the majority of the times, the local agencies have always prevailed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? All right, seeing none, I'm going to bring it back to the council. And Mr. City Attorney, can you just sort of run through the items that we're going to be approving today and what we need to do? But before you do that, I know the city clerk has a clarification they would like to make.
Yes, in the staff report on page 4, under the city attorney and partial analysis, it says that the deadline for submittal of the impartial analysis and arguments is Tuesday, July 30th. This should actually be Tuesday, July 20th at 5 p.m. Direct arguments are still 300 words in length. Also, the staff report mentions an Exhibit D for the submission of the proposed charter amendments and ordinance repeal. In all actuality, this has been incorporated into the first resolution, so that fourth resolution is no longer necessary. So all the exhibits will be placed within that first resolution that calls the election.
Okay, thank you. Mr. City Attorney?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. For the public's knowledge, what we've done pursuant to your request and analysis is take the 2 questions that we had set up and boiled them down into one. So you have a resolution, council, before you that is a modified resolution that has 1 question to be addressed on the ballot, and its specific determinants that it affects are set forth in what's called Exhibit 1 attached to it. The 1 question addresses everything that's attached in Exhibit 1 and addresses all of the issues raised by the Charter Update Commission, as well as closing the loopholes with respect to Charter Section 1107 and modifying Charter Section 113 to eliminate a potential loophole for taxing by the vote of the council and a less than a Prop 218 vote of the people. The next section that's addressed is oil well restrictions, and the question becomes, and the issue is that's restricting oil operations, and it's the amendment to Charter Section 1401. That's a slightly modified language than what was presented to you in your package on Friday, but there were no substantive changes. It was just cleanup language to make sure we could address all the questions raised by people who asked questions about that section. The one change that you'll see if you do look at it would be on Exhibit A to the charter, which is in the back of that resolution, and it's a picture essentially of all of the 20 acres. That goes forward to show all of the different easements that exist, and that's simply to give clarification as to where pipelines can be. So oil is addressed. Then we address the amended legal document publication requirements, resulting in amendments to Charter Section 414 and repeal of Charter Section 419. We simplify franchise procedures by amending Charter Section 1301. We increase the formal bidding thresholds, as was commented on by the public, by amending Charter Section 100110. Adjust misdemeanor penalties by amending Charter Section 1404. Require redistricting appointments only every 10 years by amending Charter Section 1005. Amending the civil service system and bringing it forward into essentially a modern civil service system by amending Charter Sections 711 and the series of 800s to bring it forward, as well as repealing the old Civil Service Ordinance 866, which will be replaced by a substantially similar council-adopted Civil Service Ordinance. Then doing the administrative cleanup matters, including repeal of limitation on Chamber of Commerce contribution by repealing Ordinance 3.24.010, repealing the limitation on long-term contracts, which is set forth at Charter Section 420, addressing state sale of waterfront property in order making it that it requires a vote of the people before it can be sold, addressing an unconstitutional issue regarding city manager's residence by repealing 501, and then cleaning up gender references throughout the charter as reflected in the red line. Those are the actions that are taken tonight if you put that one question on the ballot, and that's what the voters will be voting on. If you have any questions as to the text, I'll be happy to address them.
Are there any questions or comments? Councilmember Gardner.
Just a question, because this subject of raising the contract limit to $125,000, I didn't read it the way one of these speakers did about it suddenly making it, all work would be done in-house if it was below that, if that's what I understood him to say.
Councilmember Gardner, I'm glad you raised that point because I would have done it otherwise. I don't read it that way either, and could give just the assurance that we have in a public meeting. City government is not going the direction of hiring more staff to do things in-house. What this does allow us to do is a more informal bid process. It doesn't mean that we're going to, again, do that kind of work in-house. It's certainly not something you've directed us to do, and I don't expect you to anytime soon.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ken.
Yeah, I want to say that I am in wholehearted support of the clarification here on the city's ability to raise its property taxes and the need to remove any shadow of a doubt about that ability, and so very much support that. Following on to the discussion about oil wells, I believe it's also true that the oil wells that we have are not pressure wells like was associated with this BP disaster, and therefore there's very little likelihood of any sort of a problem like that. In fact, I'm not aware we've ever had one in 50 or 60 years of oil production out there. But more importantly, these provisions actually further some important environmental goals on behalf of the city from the perspective of, to the extent of the city's authority, making it darn clear, just like with taxes, that we'll not allow offshore drilling within the city limits of Newport Beach to the extent that we have the ability to do so. And secondly, to mandate over time, again, as the city's authority is extended, to mandate a 95% reduction in the amount of acreage available for oil wells to be operating in the Banning Ranch area. And so, to me, to be able to shrink that to not more than approximately 20 acres and provide along the way for better protections, I think is a great step forward from an environmental standpoint for the city. And lastly, we haven't spoken too much about it, but I'm also very appreciative and very supportive of the streamlining of the civil service regulations and mandates under the charter. While we're protecting the rights of employees appropriately, we've done a lot of streamlining here that will make it much easier for the city to manage its employee base in accordance with 20th century management techniques. And so I think that's another important benefit. And therefore, altogether, I am very, very pleased to support this package of changes for the charter.
Thank you. I would just offer a couple of things. First of all, congratulations and thanks once again to the Commission, some very prominent and eminent citizens who gave a lot of their time to this effort and who I think came up with an absolutely splendid and far-reaching assessment and recommendations for how we can reform our city charter. We've talked a lot today about how we're plugging the Prop 13 loophole, taking away any ability for us to raise property taxes without a vote, but we're also making our city government more efficient and doing things that will enable us to work in the 21st century in a better and more cost-effective environment. As Mike mentioned, we're consolidating our oil operations into a much smaller area through this charter. We are reducing our costs that have been mandated to us that are now outmoded in terms of how technology and communications take place in our city. And I think we'll just have a much better run city because of the whole combination of charter amendments that we have. So I want to thank Chairman Bergeson and the committee for the work that they have done. It's been a tremendous piece of work, and I think it's something that all of our citizens can be very proud of. I think one of the other things we need to do is to designate charter who's going to handle the ballot language, and if it's with the concurrence of my colleagues, I would ask that the mayor be designated to coordinate the affirmative arguments for the ballot measure. Do we need to vote on that, or can we just nod? Okay. Is there any other comments? If not, please vote on, and we're voting on a collection of items that sit not only the charter amendment, it also sits the city's municipal election for November the 2nd and outlines the rules for those elections and all of that.
Have we had a motion?
So moved.
And we're doing this in one ballot measure for the charter amendments. Please vote.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. There you go. Okay, let's go back to the consent calendar. Madam City Clerk.
Consent calendar, all matters listed under consent calendar, items 1 through 10 and supplemental item S13 are considered by the council to be routine and will all be enacted by one motion in the form listed below. The council members have received detailed staff reports on each of the items recommending an action. There will be no separate discussion of these items prior to the time the council votes on the motion unless members of the council, staff, or the public request specific items to be discussed and or removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Members of the public who wish to discuss a consent calendar item should come forward to the lectern upon invitation by the mayor and state their name and item number. If the optional sign-in card has been completed, it should be placed in the box provided at the podium.
Thank you. Councilmember Gardner, any items to pull?
Nothing.
Mr. Webb? Mr. Selich?
I have nothing.
Mr. Rosansky?
None, thank you.
Mr. Hitt?
Nothing to pull, but I did want to comment on item number 13, which is the letting of contracts for water and sewer line replacement in Assessment District 100. The city's getting ready to spend $1.5 million on behalf of replacing water and sewer lines, some of which might be 80 or more years old, in conjunction with the undergrounding of the utilities in that area. And so it's very gratifying to me to see that the city is moving forward so promptly in the letting of these contracts for the benefit of our citizens and at no out-of-pocket cost to our citizens as they do come out of pocket to get the utilities undergrounded. So it's a great project, and I appreciate the city staff moving forward with it.
Thank you. And I have no items to pull, but I'd like to make special reference to item 5, which is the approval of our memorandum of understanding with the Police Association and the Police Management Association. I said at the beginning of the year that we were going to try and craft a partnership with our public safety unions to address collectively the issues of cost that face the city and the economic climate that we're in. And like our lifeguards and firemen before them, our police officers and police management have also stepped up, making significant contributions to their own pension costs, going without a raise again this year. And I just want it to be known how much I appreciate the sacrifice and the efforts of our police officers in order to maintain service levels in our community. And we truly appreciate that. Collectively, our public safety employees gave up more than, or assumed the cost of more than $900,000. That's up from zero last year in pension costs. And that is a critically important first step to getting these costs under control.
Mayor, if I could just make one correction on S13, there's a typo. The bid came in at 9% below, not 18% below, but we'd still do good on that. Thank you.
It's half is good. Mr. City Manager, do you have anything to pull? Does any member of the audience have any item on the consent calendar that would like to have pulled for discussion? Items 1 through 13. Oh, yes, ma'am? Number 12, please. Okay. Any other items?
Current business.
That's current business. Okay, it's not on. It's 1 through 11 and, excuse me, it's 1 through 10 plus 13. Yeah, I'd be confused too. Okay, seeing nobody from the public, is there a motion on the, do you have any item on the consent calendar, sir? Okay. Please vote on the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make the motion that we need to vote on.
Second. Okay.
I therefore move to approval of items, consent calendar items 1 through 10 and supplemental item S13, noting the amendments of, don't need to do that, noting the amendment of item number 12 from our Assistant Public Works Director.
Or 13.
It's 13.
I'm sorry. 10, yeah.
Okay, please vote.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you. I now believe we are oral reports from city council members on committee activities. Mr. Selich?
No reports this evening.
Mr. Rosansky?
None, thank you.
Mr. Henn?
No report this evening.
Councilmember Gardner?
Nothing.
Mr. Webb?
Since I made my oral report on the committee action earlier, there was one thing I forgot to mention. I The Daily Pilot did a newspaper article on the walk I'm doing, and there was one major error in there, and it indicated that I always walk alone, and that's not true. My wife is a very dedicated person to accompany me, and she did not get adequate credit in the paper, and I just feel it's appropriate for me to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and I have no comments. So we're now ready for public comments. Madam City Clerk?
Public comments are invited on non-agenda items generally considered to be within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. Speakers must limit comments to 3 minutes. Before speaking, please state your name for the record.
All right, so the next G item comes up after this. So if you're here for something other than, would like to make a public comment for something other than next G, please come forward now.
Hi, my name's Matthew Thomas. I'm from Newport Beach, and council members and Keith Curry, thank you for having me up. And I just so you guys know, I'm not intoxicated. My whole thing is to have an ordinance in Newport Beach for an RBS training for all the restaurants, because you need to have trained to be what you guys are doing. You got to have trained to be a doctor. You need to train to be a hair cutter. But if you want to be a bartender, work at a door at that place, what do you need? You need to have muscles. You need to be able to be good with the stuff. And I volunteer for my buddies, for my this friend of mine who does an RBS training, and we've gone around, we've seen the difference that it makes. And I volunteer at a hospital with other head injured people. And have you guys ever been to subacute and seen how the life is after? See, mine was when I was underage drinking, because I was in Ventura County when it happened, but I used to go to bars, nightclubs, because I knew the people, no IDs required. I used to give them a high five, but the whole main thing is that we should all look into this, because it does help. I've seen how it changes the people that take it, because if you Michael Hen, you said you were rolling around Newport Beach on the bike, right, during that parade? Were you there like at 12 o'clock at night seeing all the different people that were getting in the car going home? And do you know how many people were injured that time? In 2004, there was 1,400 deaths. How many were caused by underage people? 700. What about you? And I've been on disability insurance it was 19 years, June 30th. My friend was drunk, drove off 30-foot bridge, landed. I went through the windshield, landed on the rocks, but didn't go through my skull, so I was swollen to the brain. Shunt, trach, G2, catheter, woke up paralyzed. And this is mine is nothing, but it was huge for my mom, for my dad, for my family. But everything just, because this side's a little bit slower, and this side, is all happy and fine, it has all that stuff. But when I work with others, this one man, 55 years old, these are just leaving a bar. Didn't buckle his helmet, hit a tree, boom, fell off his motorcycle, boom. They had to move the whole right side of his skull. Figure that out. I know you're looking at the clock, but it's coming. Don't worry, man. But then the girl that I visit, 40 years old, Jewish guy from Hawaii, making a right turn, south, the light turn yellow. A couple coming from a restaurant, after a few cocktails, tried to beat the light, the yellow light. T-boned her. She's been in coma 2 years, July 12th. And she just got her bone flat back put in. Beautiful girl, and we've been working together for like 8 months. She can hold her head up for like half hour now and open her eyes, someone on command. There we go. Okay, but my main thing is that was just to get out about what can happen from leaving that without the training being available to all the restaurants in Newport Beach.
What's RBS?
A responsible beverage serving.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Very important comments.
All right, cool. And that was just to give you so you guys can think. We'll be back in the next meeting, okay?
Okay, thank you.
And to the point of your comments, we do a considerable amount of RBS training, and is it the case that we mandate RBS training, or we just strongly encourage it, I know through our...
let me get a summary to you, and as a receive and file item, we'll work with the chief on that.
We've done it with some conditional use permits, I know.
Yeah, we also work with a restaurant team that works on that collectively, so...
In other cities, there's an ordinance. In 11 states, it's a mandatory that you have to have it. But It's just right here. It's if you want to have a good thing. If something happens, you have the training thing.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good job. Next, please.
Is this about the right spot for that TV camera, you think?
Well, we'll know when we go home and watch it.
Oh, okay, all right. Good evening, council, staff, members of the audience, and those watching from home. My name is Laura Dietz. I'm a proud member of the Newport Beach Sunrise Rotary Club. And last year we launched our first Lobster Fest as the annual fundraiser for our club last year down at the Newport Beach Dunes, and it was, I believe, heralded as a great success. And so we've decided to do it again, and hopefully it will be an institutional event that will sort of bridge the gap between the 4th of July and all the activities in September with Labor Day and Restaurant Week and all the stuff that happens in September, and the kids are all back in school. So I would like to encourage members of the community to support this event, not only because it's fun, but because the funds that are raised do great work. This year, the lead beneficiary is going to be our Newport Beach Mesa School Foundation. And we all know that the schools have been getting cuts and they need extra help. We also help the Harbor Drug Court, student scholarships at the Monte Vista Back Bay High School, and one of my particular favorites is support for the 1st Battalion, 1st Marines. And we've raised over the years, a couple of years, I think at least $10,000 just from our one club alone. So I would encourage all of those watching to check out our website at Lobsterfest at Newport Beach, or the phone number below here, which is 949-721-8035. And of course, I greatly encourage any members of council or anyone running for office to come. Thank you.
What's the date of the Lobster Fest?
August 1st,
August 1st.
Sunday.
Thank you.
We're making it traditionally the first Sunday of the month of August. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. I was at Lobster Fest last year. It's a great event. I encourage everybody to go, and I'm told by the powers that be that the posters showed up splendidly on TV tonight. So there you go. Are there any other public comments on matters not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment period, and we'll now go to item 12 on the agenda, which is NEXTG telecom permits for a distributed antenna system within the public right-of-way. Is there a staff report, Mr. City Manager?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and council members, as the mayor noted, this is a discussion based on an applicant known as NEXTG Networks of California. This is our typical practice. Staff will make a presentation, then typically you would invite the applicant to make a presentation. Public comments would come after that. I wanted to make a note, too, that in addition to having Janet Brown here who will make the staff's presentation, we do have Jonathan Kramer with us as well. Jonathan has consulted to the city on telecommunications matters. We're pleased that he's here in case you have some technical questions. So with that, Janet, I know it sounds like the computer's booting up, but ready to go?
Just about.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm Janet Johnson Brown, Associate Planner. We'll wait just a second while this comes up. This is
Could you pull the mic a little closer to your face?
Sorry.
Thank you.
There we go. NEXTG Networks of California has submitted 7 different telecom permit applications to install a distributed antenna system in the public right-of-way at 7 different locations in the city, at various locations along Coast Highway. This map here on the screen gives you a representation of the 7 different locations where they have submitted their applications for the installation of the DAS network. Who is NEXTG? NEXTG is not a wireless service provider, nor does it sell wireless services to individual consumers such as you and I. Instead, NEXTG constructs and operates DAS networks, which provide access and signal transfer services to third-party wireless service providers, such as Metro PCS, who has several different locations in the city. The red dots on the map here represent the existing locations of the Metro PCS sites in the city of Newport Beach. Metro PCS has elected to use the DAS network system that would be is proposed to be constructed by NEXTG to provide service to their own customers rather than installing and maintaining more of their own wireless cell sites. The DAS networks consist of antenna nodes, which are actually radio transmitters and receivers that are connected via fiber optic cables to their clients. The nodes are typically mounted on existing streetlight poles or new or existing utility structures where permitted by local regulations, and they include an omnidirectional antenna that in this case is approximately 2 inches in diameter by a little bit more than 2 feet in length, and an equipment box that is about 8 inches by 18 inches by 20 inches in height. And other than that, these facilities do not require any other support equipment such as ground-mounted equipment cabinets or pedestal meters and that type of thing. At these 4 locations that I'm going to go through pretty quickly right now, NEXTG is proposing to install new freestanding monopoles in the public right-of-way. At the top of that monopole would be the omnidirectional antenna, about 2 feet in height, and then the equipment box is mounted on the pole about 8 feet above grade. This is at the corner of East Coast Highway and Jamboree. We've just seen the views in both directions. The next location is here at MacArthur Boulevard and East Coast Highway. This is that same location, MacArthur Boulevard and East Coast Highway, looking in the other direction. This is at the corner of Superior and West Coast Highway. Again, a view in the other direction. And this location here is at Cameo Highlands and East Coast Highway. Again, and you'll notice in all of these locations, NEXTG is proposing to install a new freestanding monopole where there are currently existing structures, such as a street light pole or a commercial center, commercial building. This is another view from the Cameo Highlands area and East Coast Highway. And then the last location, NEXTG is proposing to install a freestanding street light pole that would be owned and operated by them as opposed to just a monopole. And again, you can see the antenna node sticking just above the light arm bracket here on the right side. This is at East Coast Highway and Newport Coast Drive near the entry into Crystal Cove Park. The last 2 locations that NEXTG is proposing to install antennas are SCE utility poles in the public right-of-way. This first site here is on the corner of Marcus Avenue and 32nd Street. This is at it from a different angle. Again, existing streetlight pole or commercial center in close proximity. And this is the final location at the corner of Santa Ana Avenue and Old Newport Boulevard. And at this location, NEXTG is proposing to remove the existing SCE wooden pole and replace it, the existing pole is about 31 feet, 7 inches in height. They're proposing to replace it with a 43-foot tall pole, and they would move the existing aerial lines higher up on the pole. Again, from a different angle. The DAS network proposed by NEXTG is subject to the regulations and the provisions of Chapter 1570, which provides regulation and design standards for the installation of telecom facilities. And it's also subject to Chapter 1320, which provides regulations and city policies regarding the use of the right-of-way, including a policy that no above-ground facilities shall be allowed in areas where facilities are already undergrounded. Per Section 1570.050B, location, this states that locations for telecom facilities shall be selected according to the following priority order. The first item would be a wall, a roof of an existing co-location structure or site, an existing pole, light standard or utility tower, commercial sign or architectural feature, or new or existing stealth structure other than a false tree. Also a new false tree, new Slim Jim monopole, new standard monopole, or a new lattice tower. And these locations E through F that are showing up here on the screen right now all require special review by City Council. Now, because of the installation of new monopoles in the public right-of-way, they have a greater potential for more visual impacts on the nearby property owners and residents and businesses in the area. Special review by City Council will be required for those first 5 locations where they're proposing to install a new monopole or the streetlight pole in the public right-of-way. Chapter 1570 also allows the planning director to refer any telecom application to City Council for special review in order to serve the public interest. So in this case, the planning director referred the other 2 applications for the installations on the SE poles to City Council for your special review because they were submitted in conjunction with the other 5 applications and as part of the overall DAS network proposed by NEXTG. Per Section 1570.050, applicants that are proposing to install telecom facilities that include the installation of a new monopole in the public right-of-way, or any new monopole for that matter, they're required to show to the satisfaction of City Council that the higher priority locations are either not available or are not feasible. Establishment of a new facility on a new standard monopole or lattice tower is necessary to provide service, and that the lack of such facility would result in denial of such service. Also, when applications require special review by City Council, they must show to the satisfaction of City Council that the approval is necessary to allow the facility to function as intended, and identified alternatives to the proposal are not feasible, and that the approved facility will not result in conditions which are materially detrimental to nearby property owners, residents, and businesses, nor to the public health or safety. In all of these cases, City Council may approve the application subject to conditions or deny the telecom permit application. In the case of the first 5 locations, staff believes that facts do not support the findings required to grant the approval of telecom permits. Specifically, there are higher priority locations such as existing street light poles and other existing structures present in each of the locations, and NEXTG has not shown that installing a node or an antenna telecom in this location on a higher priority location is not feasible. They have not shown that it's not feasible. Also, because NEXTG does not own or control the radio frequency spectrum to be transmitted or received, establishment of a new monopole is not necessary to provide service, and the lack of a new monopole would not result in a denial of service. Therefore, staff recommends that City Council deny the first 5 applications because we believe that the installation of new monopoles in the public right-of-way are inconsistent with the city's ordinances that prohibits installation of new facilities in the right-of-way, above-ground facilities. At the Marcus Avenue location, which is at Marcus Avenue and 32nd over here on the peninsula, we believe it appears that the proposed installation on the existing SEE utility pole is consistent with the height, location, and design standards specified in Chapter 1570. And we believe that findings can be made to grant the application as discussed in the staff report. So on this case, staff recommends that the City Council approve the installation of the antenna node on the existing SE utility pole with some conditions, which would include that if and when an underground assessment district is established in this area, the facility would be required to relocate. At the last location, the Santa Ana Avenue location, staff recommends that the existing SCE utility pole be retained. We have some concerns about a pole being installed that's more than 11 feet taller than the existing pole. We're concerned about the negative impact that could have on the streetscape and the bay and ocean views beyond from the public streets in that area. So we would recommend that the SCE pole be retained and that the antenna be installed on top of the existing pole at a height not greater than 35 feet, which is consistent with what the code allows. We believe that with conditions, the findings could be made to grant approval for this application, and we recommend that City Council approve the application subject to certain conditions, again, including the requirement that if an underground utility assessment district was formed in this area, that the antennas would need to be relocated, and that the existing pole be retained with the antenna installed on top. The other condition that staff would recommend for these two locations on the SEE poles is these are in the coastal zone, so coastal commission review and some level of approval may be required, and that should be included as a condition. That concludes my presentation. I'm available to answer questions, and as Mr. Kipp stated, we have Jonathan Kramer who can also answer some technical questions that you might have.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff?
Just a quick question. On the condition that they're required to relocate the equipment if an underground utility district is formed, I believe you're talking about, well, I'm looking at one of them, it's condition 5. It says applicants should be required to relocate the facility underground pursuant to 1320. Does that still allow them, 1320, to keep the antenna above ground? I mean, how could they put the antenna underground?
The Chapter 1320 does allow antennas above grade, but not the supporting structures. And I'll have to ask Mr. Kramer to speak to this, but unless an antenna is at a certain height above grade, they can't really transmit safely and
exactly
effectively.
My point. Right. So you're talking about like the electrical box or something? That's got to be put underground, but somehow they can
And
still
the pole that supports the antenna
could stay.
would have to go underground.
Well, how can you put the pole that supports the antenna underground?
Yeah, that's my question.
Just a question.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
If the antenna wasn't there, you wouldn't have a pole that required to support the antenna, and when the power lines are put underground, all of their facilities go underground. So that the antenna would have to be relocated to a streetlight pole or a sign or a building nearby, as opposed to having a separate facility, would be my interpretation.
Mr. Mayor, I probably came up for nothing because I think Councilmember Webb just talked about it very accurately. The only caveat I would add to that would be that in the event of that undergrounding, it would also require the undergrounding of the base equipment, which can go underground. NEXTG in one case has done it. They don't like to do it. Other DAS providers do offer it. So the equipment can go in flush to grade vaults. But the antenna would have to go on a streetlight or some other verticality to support it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. Let me invite the applicant to come to the podium now to make a presentation. How much time do you think you're going to need? Can we do this in?
I'd like at least 10 minutes. I
10
think
minutes?
we can certainly get done before then, but it'd be nice if we had that
Okay.
flexibility. I've got a couple of my colleagues here, so we'd like to certainly have a little bit of a dialogue. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is Carver Chu. I'm with PlanCom Incorporated, and we're a representative for NEXTG Networks of California. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to have a public forum and to be able to share some thoughts with you. And I've got a couple, like I mentioned, a couple of colleagues who will be spending some time talking to you as well. First, I'd like to take an opportunity to thank staff. Though we don't agree with their recommendations as they're presented to you, we do appreciate the time that they've spent getting us to this point. They've done a good job working through the material. It's a lot of new material, and so I appreciate their efforts to at least get us here in front of you tonight. I wanted to echo a little bit of what Janet's already said, just because I think it's important for you to know who we are at NEXTG and why we're here and why you've got these projects in front of you. So I wanted to, some of this will be a little bit redundant, but I wanted to quickly walk through it since NEXTG is a new name to the city. NEXTG Networks of California's state-regulated utility company has been granted a certificate of public convenience and necessity from the California Public Utilities Commission. NEXTG provides a fiber-based communications network. It's called the Distributed Antenna System, or DAS as we often refer to it, that it makes available to other commercial wireless providers, as Verizon, Metro, PCS, et cetera. It's important to point out that NEXTG is not a commercial wireless provider providing direct retail service to consumers. and it does not own its wireless spectrum, and it does not sell wireless service, as I mentioned, to consumers. For all practical purposes, NEXTG's DAS network is essentially a transport service, a fiber-based transport service that other commercial providers are able to use pursuant to a lease agreement. NEXTG is proposing to construct a distributed antenna system, or DAS, within the city of Newport Beach, which will be, in this case, utilized by Metro PCS to provide improved service and emergency communications service for Metro PCS customers. It's a mini network, as Janet alluded to, of low-power, low-emission communications facilities, typically located on existing utility infrastructure, street lights, traffic signals, utility poles within the public right-of-way. The power output of our facility is about 20 watts. So compared to your traditional macro facilities, very, very negligible, maybe less than 1% of the FCC standard. So very, very small, low-power facility. As noted, it typically involves a small 24-inch long, 2-inch diameter omnidirectional antenna and a small radio unit with as well as an electrical disconnect and a fuse box. The DAS network essentially serves as a fiber optic highway with multiple on-ramps or off-ramps. The antenna at each node serves as an on-ramp or off-ramp to this fiber highway, and NEXTG simply provides this transport service which allows its client company, in this case Metro PCS, to hand off customer voice and data signals at these various on-ramps, off-ramps, and to carry that signal across the network to a hub where it's then handed back off to the client's company. DAS systems are emerging as a technology in the wireless industry. We're seeing that it's becoming a more widely accepted alternative to more traditional macro sites because it does give you the opportunity to provide a lower impact installation or series of installations in more sensitive areas where you might have issues with topography, sensitive zoning, view impacts, and so on. So when designed properly, DAS really provides municipalities like yours with a nice alternative to what you're typically seeing in terms of macro facilities. It's integrated with existing infrastructure, so you have use compatibility. And in general, like I mentioned, low power, low impact compared to larger macro installations. Lastly, let me just say that in developing the design for the DAS network here in Newport Beach, NEXTG has endeavored to do the right thing. Since day one, it had been our preference to utilize existing utility infrastructure here in the city, with the intent of minimizing our overall impacts. As Janet has shown you, of the 7 node locations, we were successful in identifying 2 wood utility poles, but the remaining 5 locations extending along Coast Highway were located in proximity to other street lights and traffic signals. But unfortunately, due to I'll say a stalemate right now between NEXTG and the city vis-a-vis the pole attachment rates, we haven't been able to come to terms with your rates whereby we would be allowed to utilize your infrastructure and take advantage of really what DAS offers. So as a result, we're here in front of you with the project as Janet has outlined for you. I'm hoping that this meeting right now will be an opportunity for us to share some more about how we got here and to be able to address some of your questions. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleagues, Joe Malone, and I think Joe will speak first, as well as Patrick Ryan with NEXTG. They've got a couple more points to bring up.
Okay, you have 4 minutes remaining, so just so you know.
My name is Joe Malone with NEXTG Networks. Local offices are 2125 Wright Avenue in Laverne. I just wanted to expand a little bit on Carver's comments and just talk specifically about some of these applications and just give you a little bit of background, and then we'll close with Patrick Ryan with some of the reasons we believe that we're consistent with all city codes, policies, and procedures. But just to speak, going to the one utility pole, I think we have TP 2009-008. We don't have any issues. We can accept the conditions as laid out by staff, so hopefully we can dispense of that one. On the other utility pole that we're proposed to mount on, which is 009, the pole extension, we cannot accept staff's conditions. Those, and it's not that we don't want to. Basically, two reasons is that Southern California Edison does not allow pole top installations on their utility poles. We just can't do it. Even if that was a potential opportunity, there are new amended GO 95, these are safety standards put out by the Public Utility Code, which requires separation between communication facilities and power sources. So we have to have that separation between our antenna and the power source. We could probably look at that pole, because they come in 50, 45, in increments. We might be able to take a couple of feet off of that pole. Again, we're not looking for height for our antenna. We're just looking for that separation that we need. So that one is problematic because of conditions that are outside of our control. And then just speak real quickly on the 5 new pole replacements. Carver correctly spoke. It's always our intention to try to co-locate on existing utility infrastructure. And we're very thrilled when there are streetlights available, and the city makes those streetlights available to us. The problem that we have here is the revenue and the financial amount. And there's a couple of reasons behind that. We have financial feasibility issues, and there's technological feasibility issues. Basically, in a nutshell, the city is asking for $1,500 a month to attach to a city streetlight. From a basic financial standpoint, it costs us, as a public utility with access to a public right-of-way, it costs us about $3,500 to $4,500 to install a new pole. That's basically 2 or 3 months of the revenue that we'd have to pay to attach to your street light. But beyond that, our business model and our technology, the DAS technology, we earn $400 to $600 per month in revenue, and the revenue is generated at each one of these nodes. At a $1,500 rental rate, we're paying 3 times what we earn in revenues. That's just a non-starter for us. We just can't do that. It's just bad. You just can't survive on that. Also related to the technology issues, is it seems like the city's taking a one-size-fits-all. And I think as it's clearly represented here, this is a different technology. It's a lower-powered technology. It doesn't go as far. And if you want to do an apples-to-apples comparison, it takes anywhere from 8 to 12 of our DAS nodes to replace a traditional macro site. So if you do an apple-for-apple comparison, if Metro PCS, our customer, or any one of our customers would prefer to do a macro site, they would not have to use 12 of our nodes. So if you reverse that, we're basically paying 12 times. We'd have to pay 12 times the $1,500 to do that. I think it's important for us to close with Patrick with just some of the things related to the undergrounding ordinances and the exceptions in the code from the undergrounding ordinances. So I'm going to go ahead and defer that last minute.
Okay, Patrick, you've got about 30 seconds, 40 seconds here.
Chair, members of the council, if I could just request an expansion of time, given the potential for dispute in this matter, I would just like to have
How much more do you want?
minutes.
Your colleague asked for 10 minutes.
Another 3 minutes, please.
Now, talk fast.
I'm sorry?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My name is Patrick Ryan. I'm the Vice President of Government Relations and Regulatory Affairs for NEXTG Networks. And I wanted to just say a couple of words in closing. I do believe that the application as presented so far does not accurately depict the policy issues that are at stake right now for the City Council. The wireless telecommunications world is obviously growing at an exponential rate every year. Most cities across the country are embracing it and are looking for ways to encourage co-locations. The applications that are presented to the City Council tonight make it look like NEXTG has come here and is just proposing several new poles in the rights-of-way. That is, in fact, not our application. We have proposed to attach to existing city infrastructure. We have more than 2,000 nodes just in the state of California, 6,000 nodes built nationwide. And when NEXTG makes its proposals to use the public rights-of-way, it does so based on a regulated rate infrastructure basis. And we are able throughout the country and here indeed in the state of California under 7901 to install poles at no cost. We're not proposing to do that here in the city. We are proposing to attach to city infrastructure, and we've proposed to pay $1,000 a year for that infrastructure. We're not offering to do it for free, and we are asking that the city make the right policy choice. If the city is unwilling to allow the access to the city infrastructure on anything close to a regulated rate such as what we've offered, our only alternative is to make a proposal for a new pole in the public right-of-way, consistent with the exceptions that are allowed for new poles in the public rights-of-way and consistent with Public Utility Code 7901. Our offer is still on the table, and I would implore the city to reconsider its policy and to encourage co-locations in a way that advances both the city's policy and the interests of the community to co-locate and utilize existing infrastructure. And I'd love to be available for any questions that you may have. We have
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant at this time? Councilmember Gardner?
We have a list of rates, monthly rates for telecommunication locations, and Newport Beach is very much in the middle of things, and we're not high, we're not low. These are tend to be for the carriers, though. So are you suggesting that we change our entire rate? Are you suggesting that because you're a different polka dot animal as opposed to a striped animal, that you should have a different rate structure? What are you saying here? Are we just wrong in our rates, or are we not discriminating?
The public right-of-way has been designated by the state legislature, and indeed through federal legislation, to be a sort of a special place for use of telecommunications facilities. There are utility lines throughout the public rights-of-way, all in the state and throughout the city. Some are above ground, some are below ground, and in no instance is there a market for those rates. There are some exceptions where the city has been able to negotiate and treat its streetlights as a market in order to sign some agreements with companies like T-Mobile, Verizon, others that are wireless carriers, and they have the wireless carriers have been known to enter into such agreements on a one-off basis because that's not their primary business model. They don't use and occupy the public rights-of-way like other utilities, Southern California Edison, Verizon, the wireline company, or the cable company. And so for them, looking at it globally, they're able to sort of justify that type of one-off expenditure. A company like NEXTG, however, needs to compete with other carriers that utilize the public rights-of-way on a regulated rate basis. So it's not that we're a different animal. We're very similar to other public utilities in the state and that utilize the public rights-of-way. Just because the city has been successful in negotiating different rates with other carriers does not mean that that's either legal or sustainable.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. Let me open up this hearing and invite public comment. Anyone wishing to speak from the public, please come forward and state your name, please. We'll have 3 minutes of comments for each speaker, if we can.
Honorable Council members, I'm Stephen Cray, and I'm speaking as president of the Cameo Association. It's nice to make your acquaintance, and thank you for all the good work you're doing. I sent a letter to City Council that I thought maybe I should read because it highlights the most important aspects from our association. Cameo recently expended large sums of money in order to beautify its entrances, obtain city approvals for beautification of the city parkways along Pacific Coast Highway and the vegetation, even matching the exact specifications of the various trees that the city wanted. Cameo has also located all of its utilities underground. We even removed a streetlight at the corner of Cameo and Pacific Coast Highway, and are in the process of evaluating the changing of stop signs to have a more rustic look or a nicer look. The association never anticipated that the prior contribution of Cameo property to the city in public trust would ever be used for financial profit. Well, I guess there's not much profit in leasing it out for $1,000 a year, so I can strike that from my original letter. But in any manner that could denigrate the beauty of the Cameo as an entrance community to the city of Newport Beach. And I also see there's another pole at the exit community, or the other entrance community from Huntington to the city of Newport Beach. The bottom line is that this is our community. We really don't want to have antennas in the community. We ourselves don't allow any structures that exceed 14 feet in height. Nor that can denigrate the beauty of Cameo Highlands and Cameo Shores. Our position is that There probably are alternatives if this applicant wants to pursue them. We even have space in Surrey Park that adjoins the golf course. Not saying that that's available, but I'm sure that there are other areas in the community that will not impact this city or our community. And in that regard, we respectfully request that if the city were to take it any further, they should require an EIR and evaluate the alternatives and sit down with all the homeowners so everyone gets a fair shot at looking at how this will affect our community. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Bye now.
If we could, I know most of you all are neighbors, but if we could hold down the applause, we'll be able to move through things a little bit quicker tonight. Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Paul Payne. I'm the president of Villa Point Condominium Association. I live at Villa Point. I can't speak as president because we didn't have time on the board to address this issue prior to the meeting, but as an individual, as a resident, I can say I'm in favor of the staff recommendation to not put a new pole in and another eyesore, a box on the side. There's already enough poles at that corner. We don't need any more. It's across the street from site number 3.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Next speaker, please.
My name is Marlene Howe, and I'm a homeowner in Cameo Highlands affected by the proposed monopole that would be on the corner of Cameo Highlands and Pacific Coast Highway, literally about 30 feet from my neighbor's back door. I'm about 6 houses away from that. I perhaps misunderstood NEXTG's attorney, I think it was the third speaker, who said their proposal was just to attach to city structures. Their proposal with respect to our neighborhood is a 32-foot pole. That is a hideous eyesore, not to mention the health concerns we have. Just because the federal government says that these antennas are not unhealthy doesn't make me believe that. So I do have that personal concern as well. I believe that most people do. And as a result of that, I think that this involves a diminution in value of property values to our community that must be considered by the city. You are our last line of defense when it comes to property rights, when it comes to our use and enjoyment of our property, when it comes to being a community. I do not believe that it is appropriate for NEXTG to even propose that they put a pole like that or even an antenna so close to our homes. In addition, I have a legal issue that I think should be considered. We are talking about a public right-of-way, and I've discussed this with Mrs. Mulvihill, I believe, in your city attorney office. I think there is an issue as to whether the city has the right to grant this. I understand that NEXTG is a public utility as deemed by our PUC, but it's not the same type of public utility as, say, the sewer system or the water system, which serves all of the people in our community. This is really a private contractor. They're just called a PUC. And so when they speak of what policies should be set, I think the policies that are set with respect to companies like this should be set in mind with the type of company that they are. I don't know of anyone in our community that will be served by NEXTG, personally. So I really have a hard time believing that they are a public utility company, even though my government says so. But besides that, they should pay our city for the right to do business in our city. If I want to sell something, I have to lease space. If I want to open a business, there's costs associated with it. And I don't believe for a minute that they make $500 a pole. I mean, that is beyond common sense, especially when I've seen the legal threatening letters that they've sent to the city, or at least one of them. It took a lot more than $500 to hire the attorney to write that letter. Finally, I think the city needs to check its legal ability to grant the permission to do this, perhaps on the fee title of the owner whose property backs to this pole. I realize I have just one more minute.
Actually, you don't, but
okay.
But thank you.
Your body language
we got the gist of your comments, I think.
Okay, but So the other issue I want to raise is, I
No,
noticed...
that would be your time has expired, ma'am. I'm sorry. Thank you. That's what the red
May I
line
have
is.
just one more minute, please?
Well,
I do think I have a
You
couple
can
of
tell
good
I'm in a
points.
generous mood tonight, so one more minute, okay?
Okay.
But somebody else will make
But
it up for you. That's
I'm
good-
not-
good karma.
I'm not convinced, and I hope that that counts too. Okay, I'm not convinced why 7 locations. Other companies come in here, they get 1 location. Why 7 locations? I don't think it's progress that they need more. He seemed to say it's better, we need more, because we have less wattage. What next? Somebody comes in with 50 locations? That doesn't make any sense to me. And finally, with regard to attaching to the light standards, I don't believe our community received notice of such an application. This application is for a monopole, and a lot of people in our community did not show up tonight because they believed the staff was voting against the idea of this kind of antenna. So I believe from a legal standpoint, we need notice if they want to attach to a light pole. Thank you.
ma'am. Next speaker, please.
Mayor and City Council, I'm Linda Buckley, and I live in Irvine Terrace, and I think everything has been addressed pretty much, except that I definitely don't want the one that's going to be on East Coast Highway 1011. That intersection is a dangerous intersection. There are too many things going on there already. To have a pole, a 32-foot pole there with a box 20 by 18, almost 21, I think it would not only be dangerous, it would be a distraction. It's unsightly. We're the entrance to Corona Del Mar, we're the entrance to Balboa Island. It would be an eyesore. And I go along with the proposal by the staff to deny this, and I hope you will take their advice. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Karen Tringali from Corona Del Mar, specifically from Cameo Highland. And I won't repeat anything that's already been said by Ms. Howe and Mr. Cray, because I think they've outlined that very well. But I wanted to add one additional component, is that we sent a notice out to the 311 owners in Cameo, and I believe you've received many email in response supporting the staff. We also received some emails, and nobody has wanted to overturn the staff's recommendation. So I think that clearly the majority of residents in Cameo would support the staff's recommendation to deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Other speakers?
Mayor Curry and the council, I'd like to thank you for all the time that you give to our community. My concern with this issue is more of a health issue. And I think that...
State your name, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dr. Kevin Priestley, and I live at 4521 Cortlandt Drive. Okay? I just want to read something from Dr. McCullough, who's done some research in this. As school budgets shrink, some are getting money from unlikely and controversial source, cell phone tower installations. Local schools can make hundreds of thousands of dollars from leasing towers. The debate on school-based towers is happening throughout the United States. In September, Oregon banned them on school grounds, and the Los Angeles Unified District took a similar step in 2000. So they obviously feel that there's a danger to those when they're close to these areas. For most people, the damage from this 24/7 exposure will take years and even decades to surface, even though there's a lag time of 5 to 20 years for health effects to clinically be apparent. Nearly all the biological damage comes from modulated signals that are carried on carrier microwave. These modulated information carrying radio waves resonate in biological frequencies of a few to 100 cycles per second, can stimulate your vibratory cellular receptors, causing a cascade of pathological consequences that can culminate in fatigue, anxiety, ultimately cancer. Aside from cancer and brain tumors, radio frequencies can cause Alzheimer's, senility, dementia, Parkinson's, autism, headaches, sleep disruption, altered memory function, and poor circulation and awareness. So that's one of my concerns of being right underneath this, and so I just want to present that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Mayor, Councilman, thank you for having this meeting. I am the homeowner that just bought this house about a year ago that backs up 30 feet from my backyard.
State your name, please, sir.
Pardon me?
State your name, please.
Mark Herbert.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, I'm the one that bought the house that they're going to put this on right 30 feet from my backyard. And I hope you make the right decision. It's a nice neighborhood, and the health issues and everything, I agree with everything they say. Just want to voice my opinion. Thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you for coming down, Mark. Any other speakers?
Members of the council, I want to just thank you for having this meeting. I live at 4621 Cortland in Cameo Highlands. My name is Brian Hopkins. And just to keep this brief, I'm in agreement with everything that Ms. Howe said and the president of our association. To me, it just seems as though there's too many alternative sites for a monopole to want to put one right at the entry, of our beautiful residential neighborhood. So I'm here to just say that the monopole, I'm definitely against the monopole. I've looked at pictures by the applicant of the actual antenna node that would go on top of the light pole, and I don't think that is much of an eyesore, but it seems as though you're so far apart in rent that I don't see how it would ever happen. But I don't necessarily have a problem with that. But the new pole, I definitely do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speakers?
My name is Linda Primrose, and I have lived in Cameo Highlands since 1987. I was born in Santa Ana. My parents were beach rats, and so I've always been around Corona Del Mar. My father was a medical attorney for the state of California. I have 20 years of research here on low energy fields and the health impacts that they have on immune systems in animals and humans. And I'm acquainted with Dr. Mercola. I want to tell you that everything that Dr. Priestley said is true. There are cancer clusters at Montecito Union School that is from higher electromagnetic fields. This is new technology. We are seeing now in medical reports in the annals of internal medication and different ones that there's great concern about cell phone use, and we pay a lot of taxes to live in Corona Del Mar, much less than these people are going to pay you to put these poles in. And none of those other poles are as close to a residential neighborhood that I could see from the pictures that were shown as this pole is to a residential neighborhood. So I wanted to bring that up. I've been involved in this. I've been to the PUC commission, the little grandma in tennis shoes. But I do know about problems from this type of stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members. My name is Todd Lewis. I'm the Park Superintendent at Crystal Cove State Park. I'm just here to provide brief comment of Crystal Cove's position on this NEXTG proposal regarding specifically the Newport Coast Drive and East Coast Highway location for a monopole or streetlight pole antenna node. We stand in strong opposition to the installation of this pole. It goes directly against what the park stands for, which is preservation of the natural environment. When possible, we're actually removing facilities. As part of a construction project we're working on right now, we're removing 3 or 4 existing pole facilities. We've had recent experience with NEXTG on another pole location within Newport city limits, and it does have a direct negative impact on the viewshed, the coastal viewshed. And in this case, we serve as a beautiful entry point for both Corona Del Mar and an introduction to the coast as you come down Newport Coast Drive. So thank you very much for your time, and we'd strongly encourage you to deny this application and request that NEXTG pursue other alternatives.
Thank you, Rich. Let me just ask a question, because you referenced another experience with this operator. It's my understanding that they sort of utilized Caltrans right-of-way to stick a pole adjacent to the Crystal Cove cottages. Is that more or less accurate?
Yes, sir, that is more or less accurate. I do have some documentation on that with me if you'd like to receive that.
I can't think of a more inappropriate place to put a pole, but thank you.
We feel similarly. Thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name's Dale Gear. I live in Laguna Beach, but I'm here to speak for Friends of the Newport Coast because we've been working on this state park for, almost 40 years now. I'm here just to speak about the one pole that's associated there that Todd just spoke about. One of the things that was shown on the screen was that any project that's presented should not be detrimental. And this pole will definitely be detrimental to the purpose of preserving a historic site. This whole park was recently designated a national landmark, and the purpose is to preserve open space, preserve views, preserve the land as it was, not to fill it up with a bunch of new stuff. So adding one more street light just is one more wedge in doing that. The Friends would suggest, first, to deny the project. Second, if you opted to approve the project, then they should definitely work with the park staff to relocate it someplace else. The location should be on the inland side of Coast Highway, so it doesn't interfere with views. And they should get coastal permits before they go putting poles down, which, as you referred to at the Shake Shack, they did not do that and did not do it at El Moro. It appears to me as though this company is willing to sacrifice the beauty of this site for financial gain, and I think they should be held accountable for that. Thank you.
Any other members of the public wishing to speak? All right, seeing none, let me offer the applicant 3 minutes if you'd like to make a summation, and then we will take it into the council for advisement.
Thank you very much. Patrick Ryan, Vice President of Government Relations and Regulatory Affairs for NEXTG Networks. Happy to say a couple of words. I've aggregated the comments into 3 general groups, and I would like to say that it might make sense if the council is leaning towards a denial to continue the matter. There are some issues here raised that I think merit continued study. I'm very interested in the statements from a representative from the California State Park System. I've never experienced a California state employee come and speak on behalf of a state agency, and so I would like to look into that. It could be beneficial for everybody. The health issues is one of the things that was concerning to many people, and while that is an area that has been preempted by the Federal Communications Commission, we recognize that it's something that comes up quite a bit. Our facilities are so low power, they're deemed to be categorically excluded from regulation. We've done actual measurements throughout the state. Would be happy to offer the same courtesy here that show that our actual output is less than 0.5% of the applicable limit. In fact, they're so low that the commercial equipment available to measure it doesn't even register, since the equipment itself is regulated on a system to measure between 1% and 600%. Be happy to offer that same measurement of an actual site here in the area or of one of our sites after constructed. Many of the concerns are about the new poles, and I just want to reemphasize again that our initial application to the city, which started more than a year ago, was to co-locate on existing city infrastructure. It was not to place new poles, and it is still our preference today to co-locate on the city infrastructure, and we believe that the city can make that decision. And if the city is unable to make that decision, we are entitled, we believe, and there is a dispute here in our interpretation of the code with the city, but there is an exception in Chapter 15 for facilities that include antennas. We fall within that exception. And in spite of the provision in Chapter 13, which may state otherwise, the code needs to be read as a whole. And in order for that exception to be applicable, we believe that it needs to apply in cases like this. And that's all I have, unless there are any other questions.
Thank you. Mr. Webb?
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious, and this doesn't directly relate to the poles, but are you already installing your underground cables? Is that what we see all over town, the little potholes and the cable driving machines and that type of thing? Is that your operation?
I would have to confer with my colleagues in order to find out the specifics, in order to find out the specific locations you're referring to. But yes, my understanding is that permits have been granted separately for the fiber optic network that NEXTG is installing. And yes, we have proceeded with those installations where we have permits.
Yeah, I'm just not very happy with the way that's proceeding. It seems like to me an operation that is really impacting our traffic service around the community.
And if there are any specific concerns that you may have, I'd be happy to address them with our construction crews. We certainly don't want to impact traffic in any way that's inconsistent with.
Mr. Webb, are you speaking mostly of Coast Highway? Is that the only place you're seeing it?
Mr. Kent?
I did have one other quick question. It's still unclear to me. If your system were to be installed along these locations, are there any cell phone users that would actually perceive that they're getting better service, better reception?
Absolutely. The customer that NEXTG is serving in this particular instance, a company called Metro PCS, is a relatively new carrier. They started their service earlier. We're not here to sell the service of the carrier or to promote their activities, but the users of Metro PCS's system would most certainly experience increased signal coverage and capacity. And I would add that our business model is intended to provide services to multiple carriers. And so while we mention one particular carrier for this application, we do plan to be back in the city and with other applications at some point in the future. We don't have anything concrete today. And there are other instances throughout the state where we have multiple carriers on our system. It's one of the great advantages of using a host like NEXTG, because we are able to use our fiber optic systems and our infrastructure to carry multiple carriers' signals.
But do you need a new set of antennas then for each new carrier that you contract with?
And it depends on the
I understand your fiber optic backbone may not, but you need, so you're going to need more antennas.
The most expensive component, it's true that the most expensive component of our network is the fiber optic backbone, and that is capable of serving multiple carriers. The specific antennas themselves are able to share carriers. It depends on the carrier, it depends on the frequency reuse, and we have co-located multiple wireless carriers on one location. And in one example, in one sort of extreme example, at the University of California, Santa Cruz, we have all 5 carriers sharing the commonly installed DAS system on campus.
Okay.
Does that mean that you get the $300 a month from each of those? So you would get $1,500 a month from that antenna?
I should perhaps back up and clarify my offer. We have
or whatever
stated,
whatever the price was, you would get 5 times because you had the 5 carriers.
We do, but let me just say for the record that our proposal has in the past included and is still on the table today a revenue sharing proposal to the city, which is very similar to the revenue sharing proposal that the city has from the cable company or before the state has stepped in to occupy that field. But we would be willing to offer the city a revenue sharing opportunity so that it would increase as the carriers increase on the system. Absolutely.
Mr. Webb?
I may have misunderstood what you said earlier, that you had 7 or 8 of your antennas was equivalent to one cell antenna. Is that, maybe can you put it in context of what you said? You indicated that cell towers were much more significant, and it took 7 or 8 of your facilities to make up one cell tower.
Roughly speaking, there are about 6 of our nodes covers about the same area as a very tall, full power location in a commercial area. In a sort of abstract sense, if it were possible to install one very large tower in the middle of the city, several hundred feet high, it would be theoretically possible to cover the entire area. However, because so many different users are using that system, the capacity of that system becomes very congested. It's sort of like an umbrella that covers the area. And in order to be able to reuse those frequencies, the technology is moving forward in such a way that the heights of each antenna is becoming much lower, because those areas cover much lower areas. They're sort of like mini umbrellas, and those frequencies can then be reused, and the spectrum is more efficient in that way.
But what I think I'm hearing is that if we were to see a substantial expansion of your network within the community, we would see a 7 times expansion of antennas in the community, and that really worries me.
The assumptions that we've entered into, and we would be willing to put this in the right-of-way use agreement if we reach terms with the city, is that we could cover an area like Newport Beach for all carriers. A scenario that right now we're just proposing a very limited area for one carrier, but that all carriers could potentially use our system at a density of about 6 nodes per square mile. And so that is the maximum, what we would consider to be the best case scenario, what many others might consider to be the worst case scenario. But it would give you an idea of the range of how the magnitude is of this. In the case of the city of Del Mar, for example, we did commit to limiting the amount of installations that we propose to. I believe it's 6 per square mile. I think it's a similar restriction in some other jurisdictions that we've signed agreements with.
Just think, if we had a council chamber 6 or 7 times bigger, we could incorporate all the people that would complain about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let me bring this back to the council for discussion and a motion. Let me offer my comment, and that's to say that what I think this really comes down to is the city has a fee for providing this service on our poles. You don't want to pay it. And as a result, you proposed an approach that in practice, if not in plan, is about as offensive to as many people in the city as it could possibly be. Let me also say that I find that the eagerness of your firm to put poles in the shadow of Crystal Cove Park and El Moro to be particularly insensitive and incompatible with our community values in that neighborhood. It seems to me that we've offered you an option to co-locate on city poles. You just don't want to pay the money to do so. And perhaps the only thing more flawed than your business plan is your public relations strategy, given the letters that you've been sending to the city council and the lawsuits that you filed in Huntington Beach. So with that, I'm prepared to entertain a motion.
I move the recommended action to deny the proposal.
I would amend that, because the staff report doesn't suggest denying all proposals. I would move that we accept the staff report.
Okay, which would allow for, I believe it's poll number 6.
The one on Marcus Avenue, yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, everyone. Motion for reconsideration.
A motion to reconsider the vote on any action taken by the City Council at either this meeting or the previous meeting may be made only by one of the council members who voted with the prevailing side.
Is there a motion for any reconsideration? All right, seeing none, we have an adjournment tonight. Corporal Claudio Patino was killed in action. This is a solemn thing, ladies and gentlemen, so let's please be quiet as we leave. Corporal Claudio Patino was killed in action on June 22nd in the Helmand province of Afghanistan. His sister Claudia works in the city's Administrative Services Department. Claudio was raised in Yorba Linda and joined the Marine Corps shortly after graduating from El Dorado High School in 2006. Being a Marine had been his lifelong dream. Claudio served a tour of duty in Iraq and another in Afghanistan. Then after returning home, he requested a special transfer in order to redeploy to Afghanistan in March of this year. Claudio is remembered as a strong and proud Marine who had a heart for those in need. His family is establishing a charity in his name to send care packages to Marines serving in Afghanistan. He is survived by his wife, Jamie Burns, parents Claudio and Evelyn, and 7 brothers and sisters. Funeral services have been held, and Claudio was laid to rest last week with full military honors in Riverside National Cemetery. We are grateful for and humbled by his commitment to serve our country, and we extend our deepest sympathies to the Patino family. And in Claudio's memory, we are adjourned. Yes, and we will reconvene the closed session.